You want to hear about a road trip that went wrong? God, I still get the shakes thinking about it. My name's Jake, and this happened about 5 years ago. My buddy Leo and I were driving from Phoenix to Denver for a music festival. We were young, dumb, and full of that invincible feeling you only get in your early 20s. The plan was simple: drive straight through the night, taking turns at the wheel. We'd blast music, chug cheap gas station coffee, and make it to Colorado by sunrise. The first few hours were a blast. But then, around 2 a.m., somewhere in the vast, empty darkness of northern Arizona, we hit a detour. My phone GPS, which had a spotty signal to begin with, just gave up. We found ourselves on a thin, winding ribbon of asphalt called Highway 179. It wasn't on any of our maps. This road was wrong. It was too quiet. No other headlights, no distant glow of a town, just an ocean of blackness pressed against the windows. The air itself felt thick, like we were driving through soup. Even the radio, which had been blaring classic rock, dissolved into a hiss of static. "Great," Leo muttered, slapping the dashboard. "We're in the opening scene of a horror movie." "Don't be a dumbass," I said, but my knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The jokes died in our throats when we saw her. A figure up ahead, standing right on the white line at the edge of the road. My high beams hit her, and she didn't even flinch. She was a young woman, couldn't have been more than 20, wearing a simple, old-fashioned white dress that looked like it was from the 1950s. It was fluttering in a wind I couldn't feel inside the car. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and pleading. "Whoa, dude, stop," Leo said, his voice low. "Are you insane?" I shot back. "A lone woman in the middle of nowhere at 2 a.m.? That's serial killing 101. She looks like she's in trouble, man. Just slow down. We'll ask if she's okay." Against every primal instinct screaming at me, I slowed the car to a crawl as we approached her. She didn't move, just stared into the headlights. As we drew level, I rolled my passenger window down a crack. The air that rushed in was ice cold and carried the scent of dry dust and something else, something metallic, like old pennies. "Are you all right?" I called out. She turned her head slowly, her movements unnervingly smooth. Her eyes were a deep, liquid brown, but they held no light. "My car, it broke down. Back there." Her voice was a whisper, but it carried perfectly, as if she were speaking right next to my ear. "Can you give me a ride to the next town? It's just up the road. Blackwater." I looked at Leo. He gave a hesitant nod. The name Blackwater sounded familiar, like a town I'd heard in some old story, but I couldn't place it. My better judgment lost out to a weird, chivalrous guilt. "Yeah, get in." She slid into the back seat without a sound. The car instantly dropped 10 degrees. Leo turned up the heat, shooting me a wide-eyed look. I pulled back onto the road. "So, Blackwater, you said?" "Yes," her whisper came from the back. "Just keep going. You'll see the sign." We drove in silence for what felt like an hour. The only sound was the hum of the tires and the hiss of the dead radio. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. She was just sitting there, hands folded in her lap, staring out the window at the absolute nothingness. She never fidgeted, never sighed, never breathed. "So, what's your name?" Leo asked, trying to break the tension. "Lillian," she whispered. "I'm Leo. This is Jake." "What were you doing out here all alone, Lillian?" She was silent for so long I thought she hadn't heard him. Then she said, "I was going to meet my fiancé. There was an accident." "Oh man, I'm sorry," Leo said. Is he okay?" "He's waiting for me," she said, her tone flat. "In Blackwater." A green reflective sign materialized out of the darkness ahead. Blackwater, 1 mile. Relief washed over me. Almost there. "Almost there," I said, more to myself than anyone. As we crested a small hill, the town of Blackwater lay spread out in the valley below, or what was left of it. The place was a ghost town. Buildings were skeletal ruins, roofs caved in, windows like empty eye sockets. The road was cracked and choked with weeds. There was no light, no life, nothing. "What the hell?" Leo breathed. "Stop here!" Lillian's voice was suddenly sharp, urgent. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt at the town's derelict welcome sign, which was hanging by a single rusted chain. "This is it," she said. "Thank you for the ride." She opened the door and got out. The cold rushed in again. She stood for a moment beside the car, then leaned down and looked through the open door at Leo. Her face was even paler in the dashboard lights. "You're very kind," she whispered. Then she reached out and touched his hand, her fingers brushing his knuckles. "I'm so sorry." Before we could say a word, she turned and walked towards the ruins of Blackwater, her white dress seeming to glow in the darkness before she was swallowed by the shadows. Leo let out a long, shaky breath. "Dude, what the hell was that?" "I have no idea. Let's just get out of here." I threw the car into drive and stomped on the gas, not caring about the destination anymore, just wanting to be away from that place. We drove in terrified silence for another 10 minutes before Leo spoke again, his voice trembling. "Jake, my hand, it's really cold." I glanced over. He was staring at his right hand, the one she had touched. Even in the dim light, I could see it. His skin was turning a blotchy, waxy blue, the color of a week-old corpse. And it was spreading, creeping up his wrist. "What is this?" He panicked, rubbing at it frantically. "It's numb. I can't feel it." Just then, the radio crackled to life. Not with music, but with an old-timey news bulletin, filled with static. Authorities have confirmed the death of Lillian Mayfield, 19, in a single-vehicle accident on Highway 179. The crash occurred late last night when her car swerved to avoid a deer. Her fiancé, Robert Higgins, was pronounced dead at the scene. Lillian was transported to the Blackwater Clinic but succumbed to her injuries this morning. The date was October 17th, 1957. The broadcast cut out, returning to static. Leo and I just stared at each other, the blood draining from our faces. 1957. "Step on it, Jake," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please." I didn't need telling twice. I pushed the old sedan as hard as it would go. We finally saw a glow on the horizon, a 24-hour truck stop. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We pulled in, the fluorescent lights a blessed relief. I ran inside to get us some coffee, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold my wallet. When I came back out, Leo was sobbing. "Jake!" he cried, holding up his arm. The bluish-gray death wasn't just on his hand anymore. It had spread past his elbow, the skin cold and hard to the touch. He was shivering violently, his teeth chattering. We drove straight to the nearest hospital, which was still an hour away. By the time we got there, the strange condition had spread to his shoulder. The doctors were baffled. They ran tests for circulation issues, infections, toxins. Nothing. They called it localized necrosis of unknown origin. They talked about amputation. But as the sun rose, a strange thing happened. The progression stopped. And then, over the next few days, it slowly began to recede. The color returned to his skin, the feeling came back. After a week, you'd never know anything was wrong, except for the deep, bone-deep cold he says he still feels in that hand sometimes, especially on quiet, dark nights. We never went back to Arizona. We never even finished the trip to Denver. We turned around and went home. Sometimes when I'm driving late at night on a lonely road, I'll see a figure in the distance and my heart will leap into my throat. I'll slow down, a habit born of that ingrained politeness. But then I'll remember Lillian's empty eyes, the ghost town of Blackwater, and the sound of that 1957 news bulletin. I'll remember the feel of that deathly cold air, and I'll hit the gas every single time.
My name is Chloe. This story isn't easy to tell. It's about a trip my girlfriend Maria and I took through West Virginia. We were celebrating our anniversary, exploring the back roads and small towns, the kind of places you don't find on a tourist map. We were on Route 50 heading east when we saw the sign, Scenic Byway, Crow's Foot Mountain. Experience the legendary tunnels. Maria, who loves all things quirky and historical, immediately insisted. Come on, Chloe, it'll be an adventure. How creepy and cool would that be? I agreed, though I've never liked tunnels. That feeling of being buried under 1,000,000 tons of rock, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. But for her, I'd do it. The road narrowed as it climbed, the trees pressing in on both sides. The sky, which had been a cheerful blue, turned a bruised gray. The first tunnel was short, just a quick blink of darkness. The second was longer, and by the time we approached the third, the one the sign at the entrance had ominously labeled the Serpent's Throat, the day had darkened into a premature twilight. The Serpent's Throat was a beast. Its arched entrance was made of crumbling dark stone, and it seemed to swallow the light whole. There were no lights inside. As we drove in, our headlights became the only thing in the universe. The tunnel was long, impossibly long. The air grew heavy and damp, smelling of wet stone and decay. Okay, this is officially less fun and more terrifying, Maria said, her usual bravado gone. That's when we saw the first figure. It was just a man standing against the curved wall, half in shadow. He was dressed in dirty, tattered work clothes, an old-timey miner's helmet on his head. He was perfectly still, head bowed as we passed. Weird place to be taking a break, I muttered, a knot tightening in my stomach. 100 yards later, we saw another, and another. Dozens of them, all along the walls of the tunnel, all standing in the same listless posture, heads down. They were all men, all dressed in similar period clothing. None of them looked up as we passed. None of them moved a muscle. Chloe, what is this? Maria whispered, her hand finding mine and squeezing tight. Some kind of historical reenactment. At night, in a pitch-black tunnel? I replied, my voice shaky. I don't think so. I pressed the accelerator, wanting to get through this nightmare as fast as possible. But the tunnel just kept going, and the men kept appearing, a silent, unmoving army of the dead. They were more than reenactors. Their clothes looked authentically old, caked with real mud. Their faces, what I could see of them in the fleeting glare of our headlights, were gaunt and hollow. Then one of them moved. He was taller than the others, standing directly in our path. As our lights hit him, his head snapped up. His eyes were two black, empty pits. He didn't look at us. He looked through us. And he raised a hand, not in greeting, but in a slow, deliberate gesture, pointing deeper into the tunnel. Oh God, Maria choked out. I swerved around him, my heart hammering against my ribs. The car was filled with the sound of our panicked breathing. That's when the noises started. A low, rhythmic thump, 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 like a hammer hitting rock. Then the sound of picks striking stone, a chaotic, ghostly percussion. Faint, echoing voices, shouting commands in a language I couldn't understand. We were hearing the tunnel being built. We were hearing the past. The radio, Maria said suddenly. She turned it on, static. She twisted the dial, and through the hiss, A voice broke through, faint and far away. Collapse in the serpent's throat. Dozens trapped. No hope of rescue. I slammed my hand on the power button, silencing it. I couldn't take it anymore. I just focused on the strip of asphalt ahead, praying for a pinprick of light that meant the end. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I saw it. A distant circle of gray. The exit. There, almost there, I cried, a sob of relief catching in my throat. But as we sped towards the light, the figures along the walls began to stir. Their heads lifted in unison. Their hollow eyes turned towards us. And they started walking, slowly at first, then with more purpose, converging on the road, moving to block our escape. They weren't solid. Our car should have passed right through them, but when we hit the first group, it was like hitting a wall of freezing water. The car shuddered. A deafening cacophony of moans and wails and the sound of crashing rock filled our ears. I saw hands, pale, translucent hands, reaching through the doors, the windows, grasping at us. The temperature plummeted. Maria screamed, covering her face. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I floored it, my eyes squeezed shut against the phantom limbs and agonized faces swirling around us. The car bucked and shook as if being pummeled by a storm. And then, silence. Bright, gray, overcast light. We were out. We were through. I slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt on the shoulder just outside the tunnel mouth. Maria and I were both hyperventilating, tears streaming down our faces. The car was ice cold. We turned and looked back at the tunnel. It was just a dark hole in the mountain. Silent. Innocent. We sat there for 10 minutes, just trying to breathe, to process what had happened. "We need to go," Maria finally said, her voice a raw whisper. "Now." I nodded, putting the car back in drive. As I pulled onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. And I saw him. The tall one, the one who had pointed. He was standing at the very mouth of the tunnel, clear as day, watching us leave. And this time, he wasn't alone. Hovering just behind him, peering out from the darkness, were the faces of dozens of other men, their expressions a mixture of longing and despair. They were trapped there, and for a few terrifying minutes, so were we. We drove straight home, no more scenic stops, no more adventures. We tried to research it later. We found old newspaper articles about the Crow's Foot mountain tunnels. They were built in the 1880s. There was a collapse in the Serpent's Throat in 1891. 37 miners were buried alive. Their bodies were never recovered. We didn't just drive through a tunnel. We drove through their tomb. And sometimes, in my dreams, I'm still there, listening to the sound of their picks, forever trying to dig their way out.
Howdy. Name's Ben. I'm a long-haul trucker. Seen a lot of weird things on the roads of this great country, but nothing, and I mean nothing, comes close to what happened to me on old Route 66 in the Mojave Desert. It was a contract job. Haul a load of specialty machine parts from Barstow, California, to a little ghost town turned tourist trap in Arizona. The client was insistent I take the old road, said it was part of the authentic delivery experience. Paid a premium for it, too. Should have been my first red flag. My rig is my home away from home, a mighty Peterbilt with a sleeper cab. I'd driven the Mojave 100 times. It's empty, but it's beautiful in a stark, brutal kind of way. This trip was different from the start. The moment I turned off the I-40 onto the crumbling remains of Route 66, the world got quiet. The usual chatter on the CB radio died out, replaced by a soft, whispering static. The air conditioning, which had been fighting the desert heat, suddenly started blowing cold. I figured it was just the old road playing tricks, the isolation getting to me. The first few hours were fine. I passed the rusted shells of old cafes and gas stations, monuments to a dead era. The sun began to set, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. That's when I saw the sign for the first time. An old sun-bleached wooden board with hand-painted letters. Last chance gas, 50 miles. I chuckled. There hadn't been a functioning gas station out here in 50 years. I drove on, my headlights cutting a lonely path through the deepening dark. The stars were incredible, a brilliant, unpolluted blanket overhead. But the longer I drove, the more uneasy I felt. I checked my GPS. It was frozen. The little arrow representing my truck was just sitting still, even though I was doing a steady 65 miles an hour. An hour later, I saw the sign again. Last chance gas, 50 miles. Impossible. I'd been driving for over an hour. I should have passed it or been well beyond it. A cold knot formed in my gut. I pushed the feeling down. You're tired, Ben. Your eyes are playing tricks on you. I drove for another hour, my eyes glued to the odometer. 60 miles, 70. The landscape outside was unchanging. Same scrub brush, same distant, dark mountains, same empty roads stretching into infinity. And then, there it was. The same damn sign. Last chance gas, 50 miles. I slammed on the brakes, the rig shuddering to a halt in the middle of the deserted road. This wasn't tiredness. This was wrong. This was deeply, fundamentally wrong. I was on a loop, a 50-mile loop in the middle of the Mojave Desert. I got on the CB. Breaker 19, this is Sandman. Anyone copy? I'm on Old 66, east of Ludlow, and I'm in some kind of situation. Anyone read me? Nothing but that soft, insidious static. And then a voice, faint and distorted, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. Turn back. Hello, who is this? What's your 20? I barked into the mic. Can't get out. He won't let you leave, the voice whispered, and then it was gone, swallowed by the static. A full-blown panic started to set in. I threw the truck into gear and did a clumsy three-point turn right there on the narrow road, pointing myself back the way I came. I stomped on the gas. I was getting off this cursed road. I drove for 30 minutes, my heart pounding, expecting to see the I-40 interchange at any moment. Instead, my headlights illuminated a familiar, hand-painted wooden sign. Last chance gas, 50 miles. I was screaming then, just raw, terrified screams into the silence of my cab. I was trapped. I was in a prison of asphalt and sand. That's when I saw the lights. Up ahead, a soft, warm glow. As I got closer, I saw it was a gas station. A single, old-fashioned pump stood under a flickering fluorescent light. The building was a small, adobe-style structure with a sign that read simply, "His Station." It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. Desperation overrode fear. I needed fuel. I needed answers. I needed to see another human being. I pulled the rig in and shut off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. I climbed out, the desert air cold and still. The door to the station opened with a tinkling bell. A man stood there, silhouetted in the doorway. He was tall and thin, dressed in clean but old-fashioned coveralls. His face was in shadow. "Evening, sir," he said. His voice was pleasant, but it had a dry, raspy quality, like sandpaper on wood. "Kinda late for travel?" "Yeah," I said, my own voice shaky. I think I'm lost." "Aren't we all?" he said, stepping into the light. He was an older man with a leathery, sun-weathered face and kind eyes. But there was something about his smile. It was too wide, too fixed. And his eyes, They didn't seem to blink. "Name's Eli," he said, offering a hand. His grip was firm, but his skin was cool and dry as a lizard's. "Ben, I need gas, and I need to know how to get back to the I-40. "I can help you with the gas," Eli said, turning to the antique pump. "The other, well, that's a trickier proposition. This road, it gets a hold of some folks, doesn't like to let them go." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my fear returning. "This is my stretch," he said calmly, beginning to pump the gas. The pump didn't make a sound, no whirring, no clicking of numbers. "Been here a long, long time. I keep the road clean. I help the travelers who decide to stay." Decide to stay? I took a step back. "Look, I just want to leave, please." He turned his fixed smile on me. "But you already tried, didn't you? And you ended up right back here. This is the only place on this 50-mile stretch that's real anymore. The rest is just echo." "You're part of the echo now, Ben." I looked past him into the station. The shelves were empty. A layer of dust covered everything. Through a doorway, I could see a small living quarters. And on a rocking chair, I saw a skeleton, dressed in coveralls, sitting upright. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet. Eli's smile never wavered. "The previous caretaker," he explained, as if showing me a prized pet. "His watch is over. Mine isn't. Not until I find a replacement." He took a step towards me. His kind eyes were gone, replaced by a bottomless, ancient hunger. "You seem like a sturdy fellow, used to long, lonely hours." I turned and ran. I didn't care about the truck, about the load. I just ran into the desert, away from the road, away from that terrible station. I heard Eli call out behind me, his voice no longer raspy, but clear and powerful, echoing across the emptiness. "The road provides, Ben, and the road takes." I ran until my lungs burned, until I collapsed behind a large rock. I hid there shivering, watching the station. After a while, the lights went out. In the starlight, I saw Eli walk out to the middle of the road. He stood there perfectly still for the entire night, just staring down the empty asphalt, waiting. When the sun began to rise, he was gone. So was the station. It had simply vanished. I walked for hours in the blistering heat, my throat parched. I was sure I was going to die, but then by some miracle, I stumbled onto a dirt service road. And a few hours after that, a park ranger found me, delirious and dehydrated. They never found my truck. The company said the load was insured. The official report said I'd likely had a heat stroke, abandoned my rig, and hallucinated the whole thing. But I know what I saw. I still have dreams about Eli's fixed smile. I don't drive long haul anymore. I stick to the East Coast, where the roads are crowded and the cities have lights. Because out there in the vast, empty deserts of the American West, there are places where the old roads don't just decay. They get hungry, and they have caretakers. And if you're not careful, if you take a wrong turn onto a road that shouldn't exist, you might just become a permanent part of the scenery, forever stuck, just 50 miles from your last chance.